It's late August in Charlotte, North Carolina. The sun is down and the streets have that heavy, sticky kind of heat that clings to the city long after the day is over. On the Lynx Blue Line train, a light rail that snakes through Charlotte's neighborhoods and into the bustling downtown, most people are just heading home, tired from their shifts. It's a normal night, until it isn't. One of the passengers on board that evening was 33-year-old Carlos DeJuan Brown. People in Charlotte knew his name, but not for anything good. His whole life had been a revolving door of arrests, starting when he was just a teenager. By the time 2007 rolled around, Carlos already had a record, and the pattern kept building: speeding tickets, shoplifting, robbery, breaking into homes, larceny. In 2015, the court finally said enough and sent him to prison after a string of violent robberies with a weapon. He was gone for a while, but when he got out in September 2020, he didn't exactly straighten up. Within months, Carlos was back in trouble, assaulting his own sister, biting her during a fight. She dropped the charges because she worried about his mental health, and honestly, she wasn't wrong to be worried. By 2014, doctors had diagnosed Carlos with schizophrenia. He was in and out of shelters, sometimes homeless, often talking about things that didn't make sense to anyone else. Police reports showed him ranting about man-made material controlling his eating, his walking, his talking. Still, the law kept catching up with him, trespassing, disorderly conduct, even abusing the 911 system. 14 arrests in total. 14 times the system tried to correct his path, and 14 times he slipped right back into the same chaos. So when Carlos boarded the Lynx Blue Line train on August 22nd, 2025, no one knew it, but they were about to meet the full force of his downward spiral. He didn't even bother paying for his ticket, just slipped on as he always did. He sat down, tense, shifting in his seat, pulling strange faces like he was caught in a conversation no one else could hear. To some, it looked like anger. To others, maybe confusion. To him, maybe it was just another night lost in the storm of his own head. And then, another passenger got on board. At 9:46 p.m, the train stopped at the East-West Boulevard station, right in Charlotte's South End. That's when 23-year-old Irina Zarusa stepped inside. She had just finished a long shift at the pizzeria where she worked, smelling faintly of dough and tomato sauce, her hair pulled back, her earbuds in, phone in her hand. She didn't bother with anyone else on the train, just found a seat, sat down, and scrolled like most of us do when we're winding down. Irina's story couldn't have been more different from Carlos's. Born in Ukraine in 2002, she'd lived through the war, the displacement, and the heartbreak of leaving home behind. In 2022, she moved to the US with her mother and siblings, starting fresh in Charlotte. She was young, bright, and determined, taking classes at community college, dreaming of becoming a veterinary assistant. Her life was supposed to be beginning, not ending. She sat directly in front of Carlos, two strangers. No words exchanged, just one young woman exhausted from work and one man unraveling in silence behind her. For the next 4.5 minutes, the train rumbled along the tracks like any other night. Passengers swayed gently with each turn, some staring out the windows, others dozing off. But behind Irina, Carlos was shifting in his seat, his jaw tight, his expression contorted like he was fighting something no one else could see. And then, without warning, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a folding knife, and flicked it open. He stood up, gripped the bar in front of him with one hand, and with the other, he drove the blade forward. Irina never saw it coming. The first stab landed fast. Irina jerked, confused, her body recoiling before her brain could even register what had happened. Then came the second, then the third. In less than 10 seconds, everything changed. She curled her knees up to her chest, instinctively trying to shield herself, her wide eyes locking on Carlos. There was no argument, no confrontation, just pure shock. For a few seconds she held on, her body trembling, her mind surely scrambling for answers, but the damage was already catastrophic. Within moments, her strength gave out, and she crumpled to the floor of the train. The other passengers sat frozen, stunned by what they'd just witnessed. It was so fast, so brutal, that some of them didn't even realise Irina had been stabbed. Maybe they thought it was a fight, a scuffle, or some kind of outburst. No one expects something like this to happen on their evening commute. Carlos, meanwhile, didn't panic the way you might expect. He paced a little, restless, like he wasn't entirely sure what to do next. His hand had been cut during the attack, and he stripped off his orange sweatshirt, wrapping the fabric tightly around the wound. Then, like nothing had just happened, he moved toward the exit doors. It wasn't until about 90 seconds after the stabbing that reality sank in for the witnesses. Irina wasn't moving. Blood was pooling. That's when people finally rushed to her side, dropping down on the dirty floor of the light rail, pressing their hands over her wounds, desperately trying to save her. But it was too late. At 9:52 p.m, Carlos stepped off the train, disappearing into the night air of Charlotte's South End, leaving chaos and horror behind him. By 9:55 p.m, the panic had spilled outside the train. Passengers scrambled to call 911, their voices shaky as they tried to explain what had just unfolded. "A woman's been stabbed. On the train. She's bleeding. Please hurry." The dispatcher pressed for details: the suspect, the weapon, the location. Witnesses described him the best they could. A black male, black shirt, orange sweatshirt, blue jeans. Some said he looked agitated, like he wasn't even fully aware of what he'd just done. But now he was gone. Vanished from the car like a shadow slipping out into the night. First responders rushed to the platform. The scene was grim. Irina was lying on the floor of the train, unresponsive, her skin pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Strangers, people who had been fellow commuters just minutes earlier, were still kneeling by her, trying to keep pressure on her wounds. But their hands were covered in blood, and their eyes told the truth. They already knew this fight was lost. At 10:05 p.m, Irina Zarusa was officially pronounced dead. Just hours earlier, she'd been serving pizzas, laughing with co-workers, and planning her future. Now, her life had been cut short in the most senseless way imaginable. Carlos hadn't gotten far. Officers flooded the area, swarming the South End platform. His injured hand, wrapped in that orange sweatshirt, gave him away. They arrested him without a fight, pulling the murder weapon from near the platform. A folding knife, small, ordinary, yet devastating in his hands. The charge was immediate: first-degree murder. But even in those first few hours, detectives could tell this wasn't just going to be treated as another local homicide. A man had walked onto a public train and turned it into a crime scene. That meant federal eyes were watching too.